Hey, polished people, what's going on? It's your girl, the Polished Lady. Listen, I am here at Stewart Speaker Series. It's super amazing to be in this space because I have been able to connect with super legendary people, right? Such as Soledad O'Brien. I am so happy to sit down and just chat with you. Just one, because you lead the way in journalism as a woman, as a professional, and I just want to give you your flowers and thank you ahead of time.
Thank you. That's so kind. I so appreciate that.
Absolutely. So just to jump right in, can you share with us, why journalism was your chosen path?
It wasn't at first. When I was in college, I was actually pre-med, and I really loved science. And loving science and medicine, when I decided I wasn't going to be a doctor, was kind of my way into journalism. My very first job was working with a medical reporter at WBZ TV in Boston. Wow. And, I didn't have a lot of responsibilities. I fetched a lot of lunches for people and logged a lot of tapes.
Yeah.
But I think it was my interest in storytelling around science that helped me a lot in my career, because I would go on after that to work with a medical reporter at NBC News in New York. I anchored a show about technology when I was in San Francisco. And so every step of the way, I sort of got to work in science and technology, kind of bringing it to the public in a way, and bringing it to the public, I think, in very basic, understandable terms. So the show we did in 1996 was when MSNBC launched, and that was called The Site, and not very many people watched it, but it really was one of the very first sort of cable news shows about technology, not geared for a tech audience, right? Geared for grandparents who are trying to figure out, how do I set up a web page of my grandchildren's pictures? So science has helped me a lot. And that really was the start of it, was just my interest in something outside of journalism, but always interested in storytelling, that got me into journalism.
Much like myself, I love to tell stories and just connect with our community, because there's so many lessons that can be learned. And I know with Soledad Productions, you have done such, but how is it that you're able to tell the stories that are needing to be heard, and also keep the integrity of yourself, or, being a journalist, having that artistic eye?
Yeah, for me, it's always sort of, I don't run into a lot of people on the kinds of stories that we do.
Right.
We often do stories that look at underserved communities and how policy sort of lands on people, and frequently people who, where it's unfair, it's unjust. And so unfortunately, usually you don't bump into other people working on those stories. We have two projects that are up for Oscars this weekend. One is called The Perfect Neighbor, which is on Netflix. The other is called The Devil is Busy, which is on HBO. Perfect Neighbor is about a stand your ground case in Ocala, Florida. I mean, it's a policy issue that disproportionately affects Black people. And so it's an interesting way to take a look at that issue. And then The Devil is Busy is a look at an abortion clinic in Georgia through the eyes of the security guard who sort of takes us through her day. Again, I don't bump into other people doing those stories.
Right.
And I like that. I like being able to tell stories that I think are important, that I think are necessary and meaningful and probably historic in a lot of ways, and to be there for those stories. And I'm okay with it not being like the pop culture moment at this time. I care about, sort of what's happening, not in politics, but in policy.
I love that. And can we touch on, in today's society, especially for me, because I'm a millennial and I have a lot of content creators that lead the way here in Indianapolis, Indiana, and they're on the up and coming, but they don't have that journalism background. What is the disconnect, and what tip or piece of advice would you offer them to say, hey, I want you to keep this in mind, because information is so readily available to us. We often use social media as our fact checker, and we stop there.
It's such a great point, and it's such a great question. I was watching a woman today who was talking about a case that she had been covering, and she was sort of an online sleuth, right? She had a podcast, and she started by saying, you know, when this first came out, I believed this, and I said all these things, but now that the evidence has come in, I'm kind of changing my mind. And I thought, okay, but for the 6 weeks that you didn't see that evidence, you literally were passing along things that were actually not true. Now, she's not a journalist, and she doesn't claim to be a journalist, so I'm not criticizing her for that. I just think it's important to recognize the damage that can be done when you don't actually lean into facts and really try to understand issues. When I worked at CNN, for example, there was something called The Row, and The Row, any story you would post or put on the air, the Row would go through your story and make sure and fact check every bit of it. You know, there was nothing that was like, hey, I'm giving you my best guess. And so I think things like that, like having a backup team of a bunch of people who are like, you know what, if we can't prove this, if we don't have corroborating sources, we're not going to use it. I loved that. I loved having the backup. I loved having, like, here's what
Security.
I think. Yeah, absolutely. And so for me, a lot of journalism is around aiming to get it right and aiming to get to the truth. A lot of truth is sometimes subjective, you know, my truth, your truth, but facts are facts, and making sure that the facts that you're using are accurate and that they're true. And so having a good group behind you to make sure that you're doing that is, for me, really important. I think sometimes creators, they're not journalists, and they'll say they're not journalists, and so they don't care about that as much. And so, like this woman, I was just watching her actually this morning, just changing her mind. You know, and you're like, okay, but you pilloried this guy for the first 6 weeks. Now you have more facts, and now you believe something else. That's fine, but recognize without the facts, you went ahead and sort of, you know, I think really
Slandered.
Yeah, kind of, you know, really did damage to his name.
Yeah. My last question to you, I really enjoy your time. And so my last question to you is, can you share, what do you do for self-care?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I've actually, as I get older, I get pretty good at self-care. There was a time when I would have looked at you like, self-care?
What is
self-care?
that? Yeah.
I sleep, I brush my teeth. Is that self-care? No, as I've gotten older, I've gotten hobbies. So I'm an equestrian. I try to go horseback riding every morning before I start my day, and it's really fun. It's good exercise. I work out a fair amount. I like lifting weights because we all know that if you want to be strong in your 70s and 80s, you actually have to be lifting heavy weights in your 50s and 60s. And I just started ballroom dancing classes.
Ooh.
And I am shockingly bad. I was, you know, like, I'm Black and Latina. I was like, I'm going to be amazing at this.
I bet you look great doing it.
I do not. I wish I could say that. That's a lie. I do not. I do not. They have something called the Cuban walk in dance, and I'm like, well, you know, I'm part Cuban. Like, I should be killing this. No, ma'am. No. So I'm learning. I'm trying to get good at just learning the steps.
Well, it's on the way, and I'm sure.
I love your faith.
Yes, I got you. I believe in you.
I appreciate your belief.
I believe in you. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. Polished people, if you have not had a chance to check out the amazing projects that she is Oscar nominated for, please do so on HBO Max
for The Devil is Busy,
yes.
And The Perfect Neighbor is streaming on Netflix.
Absolutely. And until next time, polished people, peace.